Trying something new can be pretty daunting. It's never a good feeling when your first results are disappointing, especially when you look around and it seems like everyone else has already figured it out. Today, I was planning to share a video about how I experimented with Simon Hurley's brand new solar paste and made some beautiful shimmery cards. And then real life happened. And now this video, well, it's still about solar paste and experimenting, but it's also about learning curves, practicing, and patience. As for the cards, well, I'll let you be the judge. First, let's take a look at these new solar pastes. There's a 6-color rainbow of them. Simon sent me a set of the 6 colors to play with, and honestly, I was a little surprised. I don't have the lunar paste, although he always makes them look so good, but I am excited to give these new ones a try. You can see from the jars that it's pretty hard to tell them apart without their labels, and that's because of the effect the shimmer has on black cardstock. I figure whenever I'm trying out something new, I should start simple and build up. I started with what I thought was the simplest thing, just swiping all 6 colors onto some white and black cardstock to get a feel for the different colors and what they can do. I've watched Simon with his lunar paste, and so I felt like I should have a pretty easy time with this, but I can tell you right away, it all felt a bit awkward to me. The pastes themselves are lovely, super shimmery with a nice soft buttery texture, and I put them down in rainbow order down the left side of my cardstock with the intention of swiping them across like I've seen Simon do. The palette knife is the perfect size for getting a small to medium amount of the solar paste out of the jar and spreading it on the panel. And this spreading tool is fabulous too. It helps you get the paste spread evenly over the cardstock. But I'm not used to that movement of left to right, and I probably should have got out my turntable to make it more comfortable. When I had the paste spread as evenly as I could, I lifted the panel up off the sticky mat, and you can see that the effect is pretty subtle on the white cardstock. Mostly shimmer with slight variations in the color. I actually really like that, and I think it'll be a great way to add a very subtle touch to a white background or to a die cut. Then I went to do the black cardstock. There's still quite a bit of paste on the spreader, and I can't put it back into the jar since it's a mix of all of the colors, so I just used that to spread onto the black cardstock. I'm slowly remembering that by holding the spreader at different angles, you can get thicker or thinner coverage, and I'm just working to try and get rid of the marks that the edges are leaving, and even switching to my right hand for more control. To finish these cards, I used the same layout for both, but with contrasting backgrounds. I cut a circle from the center of the full panel, and then I used a stitch rectangle to cut a rectangle from the remaining frame. This gives me a really interesting panel where the circle is actually bigger than the rectangle. And because I used my Ellen Hudson Essential Circles die, I ended up with a negative frame around the circles, which allowed me to bring the background color around the focal panel. I used a script thank you die from Concord and Ninth, and then at this point, I wondered if I could stamp on the cardstock with the dried paste on it. First, I tested it on the scrap from the panel with my Maker Forte Eclipse black ink. My first test got smeared when I ran my finger over it before it had a chance to dry, so I tried it again and I left it for a couple of hours before testing it again, and it works great. I was a little nervous about stamping directly onto my finished card. I should have done it earlier, but I only thought of it now. I used a small add-on type sentiment from Pretty Pink Posh, and I didn't press down on my Misty Door too hard since the panel I'm stamping on is popped up. I let it dry, and it's perfect. I added some Crafty Meraki dewdrops on both cards, and I kept them right on the base so that when they go through the mail, the fact that the circle panels are popped up will help protect them from the damage. I hope so, anyway. For my next attempt, I thought I'd step it up a little. I've got a masking stencil which will leave a border around the outside of my panel, and then I layered on another stencil. This is the Artistic Bullseye from A Colorful Life Designs. I put down some of the Royal Flush and Beluga, that's the purple and blue, and I started spreading it out. I can see it's going to take some time and experience to get good at estimating how much paste is needed. I seem to keep needing to put more and more down. When I lifted up the 2 stencils, I was pretty happy with how crisp the edges of the rectangle were, but I had a little less crispness in the pattern itself, especially around the edges. I think that's due to the fact that the rectangle stencil is between the cardstock and the top stencil, leaving space for the paste to kind of seep between. And so if you want this look with paste, I'm thinking it might be better to use a thinner mask like Post-it tape or paper to get those crisp edges. So I decided to try a stencil without the rectangle mask and just do a full black panel. This pointed lace stencil is very pretty and delicate, and I wanted to see how the paste works with those really thin lines. I tried to choose stencils with different amounts of spaces and widths of lines in their patterns to really get a sense of how the paste worked with different designs. This time I used Golden Hour and Cross My Heart, which are the yellow and the pink. And when I needed more paste, I added in some Overheated, which is the orange. I'm not feeling particularly graceful with this palette knife yet, or with the spreader for that matter, but I don't want to keep putting down more paste than I need. I want to use what I've got and get as much of it on the cardstock since again, it's mixed and I can't get it back in the jar, which you could do if you were only using one color. My result is really pretty and it has some really crisp clean areas and some that were less crisp and clean, so I think a bit more practice will probably get me to where I want to be. To finish this one, I trimmed the panel with a stitched square die, choosing the best parts of the design. I added a black mat, and then I chose a big hello die cut sentiment to really draw the focus to that rather than the less crisp areas on my stenciling. The shimmer of these pastes is super pretty. Since I was struggling a bit with the stencils, I thought I would take a step back to what I was first doing and get more comfortable with the spreading tools. But I also wanted to try something different, so I tried putting the solar paste on white cardstock that's been blended with water reactive inks. I know Simon's inks are water reactive, but I don't have those. I do have Catherine's inks, and I chose my favorite rainbow and I laid them down. Party Dress, Tiki Torch, Limoncello, Lime Ricky, Fiesta Blue, and Flirty Fuchsia. Does this happen to you when you're making a rainbow panel? I always seem to overestimate how much needs to go at the top, and I end up with a very thin line of whatever color's on the bottom. Next, I put down the corresponding solar paste on each line of color. I put it on the right side this time to see if I'm more comfortable with a right to left motion with the spreader, and that did seem to work better for me, although I still think that the turntable would have been even better. Now it's looking really pretty, but I still have lots of paste left on the scraper, so I grabbed another piece of white cardstock. This paste has picked up some of the color from the ink on the other panel and dyed the paste, and that gave me a really pretty pastel rainbow. To finish the brighter card, I used Catherine's Cosmic cover plate on it, and I got a very interesting challenge from that. It definitely cut through, but I had a hard time separating all the little offcuts from the panel. It's almost like the paste changes the cardstock enough that it really wants to hold together. I had no trouble with any of the other die cuts, so you may want to test out an intricate die before you commit. For the lighter panel, which might be my favorite, I decided to try running it through with this 3D kaleidoscope embossing folder from Honeybee Stamps. The result is super pretty, and it really emphasizes the metallic finish on the cardstock. I added a Simon Says Stamp thanks sentiment in white with a gold shadow. I'm starting to feel a bit more comfortable now, and I decided to go back and try another stencil, but this time on craft cardstock to see how the pastes look on a mid-tone background. This is the Intricate Diamond stencil, and it has lots of small holes, but with fairly thick lines. I did the full rainbow of solar pastes again, and I'm getting better at remembering to scrape off the palette knife back into the jar each time. These are the types of little habits that make you feel more in control each time you do them. I used the large scraper to spread the paste, and I didn't have enough to fully cover it. I thought maybe it would just look artistic to have it fade out like that a bit. I don't know, but the colors and shimmer on this craft cardstock look amazing. To finish this one, I trimmed the panel down and simply added a big white thank you sentiment from Waffle flower. The full rainbow of solar paste colors is visible on this cardstock, more subtle than on black, but much more visible than on white, so that's another good option. And finally, just to show that I didn't let it beat me, I went back and I quickly redid that artistic bullseye on black with the blue and purple paste, and without the rectangle masking stencil. I put lots of paste down at the top this time to try yet another motion of spreading, this time from top to bottom, and I would say this was my most successful stencil attempt. You can see that the paste looks quite white right now, but as it dries, the blue and purple really start to become more apparent. To finish this one, I trimmed the panel with a circle die, and I turned it so that the dividing lines of the 4 quadrants are vertical and horizontal rather than diagonal. That gave me the perfect spot to put a heat-embossed happy birthday sentiment from Tailored Expressions. My white negative frame ties in with the white heat embossing and adds a little bright note to this card. So to attack a learning curve with a new technique or product, I think you need to start simple, then try to take it to the next level, and don't be afraid to go back if you need to. Get comfortable with it and develop your own habits and your own way of doing it. Keep practicing and be kind to yourself. Eventually, the results will come. But in the meantime, you can use flaw hiding strategies. You can die cut your panels. You can distract with a cover plate or a large sentiment. You can embellish over flaws. Most of all, you need to enjoy the process. That's really what it's all about. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.